Dan Messick is going to introduce our next speakers. Take care, Ryan. Take care, Todd. Oh, you're welcome to stay if you can.
Cheers. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Ryan. And thanks to all the participants that are here. Allow me to introduce now Jason Tanner and Mike Whitaker. So Jason Tanner is a good friend. I've known him for over 10 years. I've known him from the beginning of my Agile journey that started around 2006. And over time, I've grown to really appreciate Jason's steadiness, his incredible depth of knowledge, and his ability to execute. We've done things together around coaching. We've done things together around training. And I learned later some things about Jason around the fact that he's a Marine, and the depth of his education that he embarked on before his Agile journey. All these things. Jason's a guy with a tremendous depth of experience. Maybe, some of the most experience, quality and quality that I've seen in a coach, actually. And he's also he's super tough, and he's also he comes off sometimes as being super easygoing, but we know he's anything but, right? And then Mike Whitaker. Mike Whitaker works at Applied Frameworks, foreign with Jason. And I had the privilege of getting to know Michael over time when we were exploring a coaching engagement. Michael is a guy who is like a human sponge soaking up the Agile knowledge. And he's got Jason as his mentor and guide. And he's about a year and a half, 2 years into this thing. So both sides are represented, the Uber coach and the relative newbie, right? That's Jason Tanner and Mike Whitaker, both from Applied Framework. So please join me in welcoming them. And Jason and Michael, take it away.
Thanks, Dan, for that terrific introduction. And I'm going to have to work hard to really live up to the build-up. So Mike and I have been working on this together, and I appreciate the invitation to speak here. It's the first time that I've done the Give Thanks for Scrum event, although I've done a couple of Agile Boston things years ago when I was doing a lot of work at Mass Mutual in Springfield, and that's where Dan and I worked together and started connecting and discussing and debating ideas and concepts. So Dan and I have been interweaving over to 10 years. I actually think it's longer, but we're not really that old, Dan. We're young guys at heart.
Yeah, I also want the record to show that Jason has a great sense of humor. He once nominated me to the board of the Scrum Alliance, which I found highly comical. He's got a great sense of humor. So thank you for that, Jason.
Sure. So what Mike and I want to talk about is really the intersection of our experiences as service members and how it relates to Scrum and the levels of discipline. And I think this is going to fit well based on some of the sessions that I saw earlier today. Listening to Avi this morning talk about discipline and the events and the exercise he did, I thought was really useful as a setup for this, because we rehearsed this yesterday with our team, and even with some of the folks from Applied Frameworks seeing the content, they made some interesting connections that really I think are going to help us today even more. But we really want to emphasize this idea of a journey, which is ultimately going to lead to something that you can use after the session to discuss with your teams, where are we and who do we want to be in the context of our maturity with Scrum, because it really is an evolution and a growth journey that we want to explore. So what we have prepared here is a dive into this journey, not only through the lens of Scrum, but what it's like for us in the service. And Mike's got some great stories. I want to share a few things. I want to actually illustrate the evolution to the ultimate elite level. And I'm glad Ryan and Todd were talking a bit about that idea of never growing out of the job, right? Always trying to reach that next level of performance, wherever it is, a higher level. and I've got a couple of videos to illustrate that. The framework really fits into the characteristics of high-performing teams and this notion of doing the right things the right way. And we'll have a little bit of time, I think, at the end for questions. And I kind of like the informal nature of this, that if you do have something in the middle while we're talking that's unclear, just stop us, holler at us, send a chat comment to Joe and or Dan, and we'll answer the question as we go. So not much to add to what Dan said. Professionally, I am a certified Scrum trainer, so I teach a couple of classes every month, sometimes more than others. But my real background started in the Marines, and where I think I was just sharing earlier this month, someone was asking me, like, how do you think about management and leadership? And it actually goes back to 1989 and learning the principles of leadership as a Marine. So I think it's really influenced how I think about Agile even. My growth as an infantry officer was all about fast decision making. The OODA loop was a thing long before we started talking about in the Agile community, and we used it to our advantage to really be successful in the Marine Corps. So that's me. Mike, anything you want to add to your background and intro?
Not really. I appreciate the invite here as well, especially being so new. I love the opportunity to share my perspective from a newer to the community, person. So again, my background, Army guy, intelligence, right? And I'm here and loving being a part of the Platt framework. So we can dive in.
Awesome.
All right.
Go for it.
Scrum is a team journey, right? So we have to be able to see that as a whole, right? So, but when we think about a team, becoming a team just doesn't happen overnight, right? Nor even when the roles are assigned or, those positions are assigned, right? All right. In most cases, when teams are formed, you don't become a team until you've actually been through the fire, like you've been through something, so to speak, right? At times, you got to learn how to work together. You got to learn how to introduce new ways of thinking and working, right? And it's a journey. So I love the saying, right? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey, the experiences you gain to get to the destination of being a great Scrum team, right? And the military is a great example of having a journey of becoming a team. As I thinking about, from you think about going on a journey from basic training all the way to the war zone and accomplishing that mission, right? So we have to learn how to function as a unit, as a team, throughout our entire careers, because we move so much every few years and we're changing teams, changing members. Scrum teams, operate no differently, right? So most of the time, members have to learn how to embrace that journey, right? Which brings me to the next photo. It's reminiscent of some things that, as a military guy, bring back so much pain and suffering and discomfort, right? So here, you got the picture of the footprints, and most of the time, you don't even know what this represents unless you've been there, right? And a lot of times you can't even see the footprints unless you know that they are footprints, right? So in basic training, right, the goal that they had was to completely change our life, right? And it started all with the way we stood, right? So those footprints are designed to put us in a position where we're all uniformed in the same way, right? We stand in the exact same position. We know, where we're supposed to be. And it's very, very odd at first to stand there, right? Because it's different than how I've stood my whole life. As a human being, I don't know to put my heels together, and it's awkward to have my hands down the way it is, right? In fact, it's super uncomfortable and hard to adjust to, right? And it felt so unnatural and impossible to get, comfortable standing here, which is what you have to do. And honestly, I felt really, really silly being there, right? Get tired of looking at the back of the next person's head, and man, I got to stand here, right? So no matter what, though, you have to learn how to stick through that process. You have to push through the silliness, push through and stick to the system. If you don't make it, right? And until we learn how to stand in those footprints on a daily basis, right, it becomes a reminder of how we're supposed to function in the military, the formation and how we move, right? And matter of fact, if you give the proper command to sailors airmen, Marines, soldiers, right, around the world at any given time, even after they've served, even a year ago, 5 years ago, some of us, 50 years ago, they can still execute this command, right? You get the face of it, you got it, he has it right there, right? So our drill instructors, they imprinted on us, right? They made such an impact that if you hear that, you know exactly where to stand. And it's a part of the journey, right, of becoming a team and learning how to function. And we all have that baseline to go back to, right?
Yeah, when Mike and I were talking about this, the relevant connection here is the idea of we all start at the same place. That first sprint for any team is challenging. It is awkward. It's completely new and different. We're changing the way people work. We're changing how they work as a team. And that awkwardness, I think, is easily observable. But the good news is that we are sharing the experience and the growth as we go through the next sprint and the one after that and the one after that. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, as we now start making the connection to discipline, if everything works, technically here, I got a couple of mentees to do. So if you join Menti, there's two of them. This is the first one. We'll do another one in a little bit. But really interested in what you think when you hear the word discipline. What words come to mind? What do you associate with this idea of discipline? So if you go to menti.com and use that code, we should see a word cloud build here. If my technology aligns. Come on, PowerPoint tech. Seeing in the chat, great. Orderly patterns. Accountability. Let's see, I got it back up here. I want to see if it's running into backup. It is running into backup. So tech isn't great. But I'll share it over here so you can see the cloud. We'll see the effect over here. Just a sec. It's really interesting. Focus right in the middle. Habit. Strict came up yesterday a lot too with our team, which is interesting. Awesome. Thanks for doing that. So Avi shared a definition earlier today, and I guess he went to a different reference than I did, because I found a couple of key words I think that are relevant to this audience when we think about Scrum. The idea of discipline as it relates to Scrum, this idea of order, some type of contact or pattern of behavior, I think is the best one there. The idea of pattern of behavior. And we've got a set of rules or a system of rules that govern our behavior and how we act and what we do in our activity day to day. And I think that's really, the key connector here from the discipline of Scrum, as Dr. Sutherland talked about as well today, is this idea of what are we trying to achieve together and how we're going to get there successfully. And I think discipline is a key element in that. So the question to ask for all new teams is, what is the game that we're playing and what are the rules? Mm-hmm. And, Mike, your experience in basic training, I think is a great example of that.
Yeah, for sure. So, basic training is the beginning where we learn the rules, right? For being in the military, we learn what to do, how to do it, why we're doing it, all of those things, right? And even it's something as simple as how we speak, right, for the military, right, plays a major role in how we operate, how we communicate, so we can all be on that same page and understand what words mean. Because words do mean things, they just mean different things amongst groups, right? So for the military, I can identify a service member by hearing a conversation, right, using certain terms, PX, base, post, right, BX, next, things like that, and even our job titles, right? So we call them something different rather than job titles, or MOS. AFAC rates, right? Things like that. And now that tells us, oh yeah, you served in the military too. And we all have that same common vernacular, so we can be on the same page. With a Scrum is the same thing, similar in nature, right? You got a sprint, daily scrums, you have the sprint review, the definition done, retrospective, things like that, right? And all of those terms are used to identify, right, that the terminology and the structure, which gives us the rules of the game, right? Rules to Scrum, as so to speak.
Right, and I think the one key takeaway, and I do, as Dan mentioned, still continue to do a lot of work with various teams and Scrum Masters and product owners. And one big struggle I see a lot is around the idea of the impediments that Scrum Masters face way beyond a team. And the guidance that I shared last Friday with one group that's just getting started on their journey was going back and having a conversation with leadership. And I said, the one way to approach this is that the organization is asking the teams to try Scrum and to play the game. However, I'm not always convinced that the leaders know that they're asking them to play a specific game, and that they probably don't even understand the rules. So not only does the team need to have a conversation about the rules of the game, but the organization also needs to think through the rules of the game, because of the need for the team to be clear about the backlog, the priority of the items in the backlog based upon the order, and their ability to be successful as the organization is evolving depends on clarity of the rules. And I added these two pictures here because the experience for both officers and enlisted, at least in the Marine Corps, is that we basically get this book of knowledge. That's what they actually say, like, where's your knowledge? And you have to be able to, carry it around in your cargo pocket. And when you're not doing something, because there is a hurry up and wait in the military, when you're waiting for something, whether you're waiting in line to get a haircut or for a meal, you've got your book out because you're reading the rules. You're trying to learn as much as you can, as fast as you can, to be able to play the rules of the game. So I think that this idea of the knowing the rules and discussing them and talking through them are key, because as we progress, then once we got started on this journey, now we've got to work things out and figure out how well we're doing. How disciplined are we? So, here we see a drill instructor, correcting one of the Marines here. And, Mike, your experience with DIs, my experience with DIs, they could be really helpful. They can be intimidating, they can be really helpful.
For sure. Yeah. They're in, like you said, intimidating. They're there to help you. But it doesn't feel like that at all times, right? Many times, you're like, man, the DI, he hates me or she hates me so much. And they really don't. They're really there to help us along the way, right? And in this example, you can see that she's correcting the Marine, right? Making her hold her weapon at a certain space and, angle and all of those things, right? So she's there to correct, teach, and train her to be the best Marine possible, right? And you think about it, right? That's the same role that the Scrum Master plays, right? He have several hats that they wear, right? In matter of fact, in the military, when we see that DI, no matter what rank you are, no matter what time of year how long you've been in the service, as soon as you see them, you straighten up. You're like, oh, let me check my uniform. I'm wrinkled here. Make sure my boots are tied. I got my headgear on correct, right? All of those things, even if I outrank that person, that hat represents something, right? And it represents the standards that we were taught when we first came in the military. So here, that the Scrum Master could essentially be that same person, right? To be that representation of how you're supposed to do things in the Scrum way, right? And following the Scrum guide, right? And here, we're not saying that the Scrum Master is going to discipline you and have you doing push-ups and all those things, right? They're not going to be doing that necessarily, but they are there to coach you and mentor you and train you and correct and encourage you. There are all sorts of things. They have so many different hats that they play, and in the role that they're in, that it's super important that you have a Scrum Master that understands how this game is played, right? And that's how it looks.
Right. And this picture I picked because I think this really represents something that's key and connects directly to what Todd was saying earlier about empiricism, because this is an inspection, right? We're actually looking at the type of inspection. We've got the Marine answering a question, the guy with the clipboard, he's writing down any discrepancies, but all of it's about improvement, right? We're going to get better and better through these series of inspections. Want to check our readiness, check preparedness, checking our progress on our journey. And I think that's really, a definite overlap here between Scrum and the experience that we're having, because that's really what we're going through right now as an organization with Mike and with every other person at the company, is how are we progressing throughout the year? We're getting the end of the year now, and we're all looking back and looking at, well, what did we do great? Where do we need to improve as an organization? What are our individual goals for next year? How do we want to think about forecasting the future and what's possible, and what steps can we take? What's our backlog? All connected. But here we are, with this particular picture, they're getting close to graduation. And I think that's where some type of framework for thinking about teaming and how we can evolve and continue to journey successfully together is really key. So I wanted to share this. Some of you may have seen it, and it's from a great book, The Wisdom of Teams. There's a short article in the next slide that will be available afterwards. We'll share that with everybody about the discipline of teams. Actually, the title is called The Discipline of Teams, which is interesting. It was in the Harvard Business Review. This idea of achieving results through collective work products while also including personal growth, which again reinforces this idea of journey together. And I think Scrum just is so connected to this generic model, which is really applicable to any team. This idea of mutual goals and a small number of people working together to solve problems based on specific goals and a common approach is really important. It may be useful to look at with your teams, to think about, like, how does this affect us? What does it mean to us? And Scrum thankfully has the commitments now where we can actually look at specific product goals, specific sprint goals, a clear definition of done, which leads to the common approach to our work, which I think is often missed by a lot of people about the definition of done. Why do we have it? So that we ensure we do have a common, clear understanding of the outcomes we're trying to achieve for the increment, for the meaningful purpose of our work. When we think about vision and objectives, they're all connected to common, meaningful purpose. So the evolution of the team, and this really, I think, is going to illustrate the journey, is the idea of what it takes to get from just a group of people showing up, putting their feet on the yellow footprints, forming as a team for the first sprint, how they become a team. And it's very natural for this dip, for that first sprint to be ugly. It's not going to work great. And you may have experienced that difficulty, that pain of, oh, we didn't really get anything done this first sprint. It happens. And it's okay. It's natural. But it's how you respond and come out of it on that journey, which is key to evolving to become a potential team and ultimately a real team that actually has meaningful impact as the team builds out its effectiveness. But what are the characteristics that lead to this type of evolution? And that's really where I want to dive in a little bit more with Mike here, this idea of the shared leadership roles and the other 6 that you see here on the screen.
Yeah. So shared leadership roles, right? This is when, everyone takes ownership and not relying just on one person to lead. Right? So super important because we know sometimes if you're a product owner, Scrum Master, they're not necessarily roles that have you accountable to other people where you're in charge, right? So everybody has to have that shared ownership when it comes to it. And you have individuals and mutual accountability, right? This is when, what you do really affects the whole team, and you have to give each other, the permission, right, to hold you to the standard that we set, right? And not necessarily be upset when somebody says, hey, you said you were going to do this yesterday. What happened, right? Why didn't you send the email or whatever the case may be, right? So you have to be able to do that. Specific team purpose, right? You got to have some vision, right? Product goals, sprint goals, all of that's super important when it comes to understanding the characteristics of the team, right? And being able to keep them in a space to where we all know exactly what we're going to do, what we're trying to accomplish, right? So, when we lack vision and direction, we are in chaos and people are not very happy. Collective work products, right? So cross-functional teams, right? Collaborating on stories and features and things like that, right? To get the best possible product delivered, right? Within that sprint, right? So you have to be able to, collaborate on your work and not be in silos or even inside of teams where, they wrote that code, so it can't be, nobody else can check it. No, let's collaborate on all this so we can make sure we're accomplishing the goals. Yeah. And then encourage open-minded discussions, right? So this is super important to have the dialogue about the work, how to solve problems, how the communication is two-way street, right? And listening is a huge portion of that, right? And being able to have that and be actively involved when it comes to solving problems and having those meetings to say, hey, we're having a struggle here. Let's have a meeting and talk about how we can fix that and be open to those ideas. Jason, I'll let you handle the last two.
Yeah, I think that the idea of measuring performance directly by assessing the work, assessing the outcomes is critical and directly relates to the Agile Manifesto. That we measure progress based on the work that we've completed. How much working software do we have for the software teams? For non-software teams, how much have we delivered that's valuable for the business objectives we're trying to achieve? And again, this comes from team research that applies to any team. And I just really like how this connects directly to how we think about Scrum, as well as the last item, this idea of discussing and deciding and doing real work together. And it is kind of sad that I still see so many teams that look at the sprint backlog as really what developer is going to take what, and they go off in a silo and they do their own thing. And we're not really sure what progress anybody's making because it's a bunch of individuals and not yet a team that collaborates. So this notion of working together and discussing in sprint planning, discussing in refinement, what is the work that we're going to do? What work can we do? And deciding in sprint planning what we're actually going to do together and how we're going to do it is essential. And I think really something to think about as you reflect on today is how is your team doing across these dimensions? As a segue, I want to take one more opportunity with Menti here to look at what characteristic is most important to you. What do you feel is really the key that unlocks team performance from your perspective? And I'll stop sharing and see what the results look like here and share them.
I can't see that.
Oops, just
It's a little bit small. You mind? Thank you.
Better?
Can you do one more increase? Otherwise, I can try and do it myself. Yeah.
Let me see.
Oh.
Interesting.
Oh, he sent. Okay. I need to. See if I can find it.
Just gonna try. Let me give that a shot. There they are in the chat. You can see the options. I didn't know what to expect when I did this, but it's really interesting how there's really two key winners. I thought there might be balance. So I really had no hypothesis about the results here, but very interesting. Yeah, you could argue like, well, they're all important. But one thing to think about on this journey is where do we want to focus? So these might be ideas to consider for different sprints as part of retrospective conversations. What is our level of accountability, for instance? Since accountability is important, maybe the team agrees that accountability is going to be important. Maybe we want to focus on that for a sprint. How well is the team meeting individual commitments, and how well is the team overall meeting shared team commitments and achieving sprint goals? So this brings up the question that I often ask a team when we start. Dan talked about how we used to coach together, but one key question I always ask when I'm building an alliance with a team as a new coach is, what kind of team do you want to be? What's your aspiration? And I got kind of get quizzical looks, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you want to be? A great team? It's really interesting. Very, very rarely does any team say, we just want to be average. We just want to be okay.
Yeah,
Have you seen
100%.
anything like that, Mike?
100% of the time. I mean, even in my time in the military, nobody wanted to perform below standard or just at the standard, right? As a whole, everybody's looking to stand out, right? To be the best that they can be, especially when lives are on the line, right? And you know, in these spaces, it's not necessarily, you know, life or death situations, but it is important for us to be able to do our best at our jobs and perform at a high level, right? We want to be able to do those things, right? And some great examples of what that looks like, right? If, you know, we all want to look like this, right? In the military, I said it yesterday while we were rehearsing, but every military member loves this uniform, right? And it's, you know, coveted. You're like, man, I don't care how much you dislike another service, this is the best uniform out there. We all, and I told them yesterday, I almost joined the Marines just to wear this, right? Just to look this good, and it's really awesome, right? So, but these people, they put in hard work, right? You just don't become a great team, you know, that you're aspiring to be overnight. They really do, and they're, you know, we all, when we're going to war, when we're, you know, rehearsing, we're out there practicing for, you know, doing our jobs. We want to be a well-oiled machine, right? And we want to be able to, so when we get to those spaces of war, we want to get to that time where we have to implement the things that we've learned. We want to be able to function at a really high rate, right? We want to know our buddy to the left and right has our back, and they know that we have theirs, right? If, you know, we don't have to worry about them covering or not covering their position and doing the things that they said they're going to do, because it could literally forget, right? So it takes sacrifice for them to get there. Same, and it's the same with us, right? You know, you're looking at that and you're like, man, there's no way, but that takes, you know, they got to trust each other to be able to throw those weapons and catch them, right? Know that he's going to throw it in the right space and be there. And of course, it takes sacrifice to be able to get to that point.
Yeah, so and this, I think, is the connection I wanted to make here. This is the silent drill team, and the level of performance that they achieve really depends on discipline, as Mike was alluding to, a lot of practice, focus, commitment. And by the way, the Scrum values overlap with the Marine Corps values. There's 3 Marine Corps values: honor, courage, and commitment. You know, 2 of the 3 covered between the 2 sets of values. So really, just to illustrate the journey, a little bit of fun here. One video is of a new group of recruits. So just so you can notice here in the video, whether or not they're in step, they're kind of messy. In a moment, you'll see them marching, right? And depending on the drill instructor to call commands, contrasted with this next video. Silent drill platoon. Notice there's no leader. All based on practice, intense focus, and alignment, right? So there's a lot of accountability, both individually and as a team, which is really the point that I wanted to make here with these videos, is that there's an evolution, that this level of performance is achievable only with that type of practice. So really, it's about doing the right things the right way, repeatedly, right? And it takes work. And I think that's what we're here to do, is support that work to be able to do the right things and encourage people to evolve over time and put in the work. And it takes effort. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of work. Mike brought this up, this idea of it can be tough. It's tiring, it's draining, it's hard, but you start to see progress over time, and everyone has to put in the work. As a Scrum team, you might miss a sprint goal. How do you recover? How do you get back up, try again, continue? It'll be definitely worth it. And one part to consider is how are we correcting, how are we making adjustments? And Mike, this idea of the marksmanship coach, we're shifting from this DI who's got this intimidation. This is one place where you actually are learning and getting really visible improvement.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Right. So you look at him, he's sitting next to her. Right. If you notice, he's never going to touch her. He's never going to touch the rifle. Right. He's going to talk to her and guide her through the whole steps. Right. Which is really important because at some point in time, he's not going to be there. So she needs to know how to do these things on her own. Right. How to function, how to see when there's a problem and be able to correct it based on the advice given. Right. And the DI is right there along the side of her, like, hey, hold the weapon tighter. Right, control your breathing, whatever the case may be, but he's never going to touch it. He's never going to take the work from her. He's going to do it. He's going to allow her to do it and coach her through it. Right. And it's the same way with Scrum Masters. Right. In those cases, you may not be able to necessarily do the work for your team, but you can guide them through it. Right. You can give them advice. You can mentor them. You can, help them remove impediments. Right. Making sure that they get through the process in the right way. And obviously, the more mature that a team becomes, right, the less of that you'll have to worry about.
So when you download the deck, I wanted to share this with you as a way of polling your team. This could be a quick survey that you could send in a simple Google form to ask, where are we in our team discipline? On a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being perfect, how well are we, for example, with our accountabilities? Are we meeting and achieving what we agree to do with each other? Or how well are we doing with our own discussion and working together to deliver the sprint goal? So this will be available. One way to think about a framework for evaluating the levels of team performance, which all connects to the discipline of the team. And as a concrete example, think about the discipline of sprint planning. Just real quick, in chat, just answer, how long does your team spend to plan a sprint? Imagine most teams probably 2-week sprints. A rough order of magnitude, I'm really curious about how long teams are spending in sprint planning. Twenty, 30 minutes, an hour, not long enough. 4 to 6 hours for a 3-week sprint. That is really good. 3 hours, okay. 1 hour for 4-week sprints. Wow. As long as it takes, interesting. All right, who's the expert on the Scrum Guide? What's the Scrum Guide say? Up to 8 hours for 4 weeks. Yep, exactly. So I just want to share one last story now. I'll wrap it up, see if there's any quick questions. In 1995, Scott O'Grady was shot down in F-16 in Bosnia, and he was recovered by a bunch of Marines. And that effort probably took a couple hundred people to synchronize really fast. And just to think about planning and effective planning and success, that didn't just happen. That happened through not only a lot of discipline, but also a lot of preparation and really tight execution. So we took 4 hours to plan and prepare and execute those missions. I was part of one of the Marine Expeditionary Units. That's one of this MU here at the bottom. And we went through this cycle multiple times. And I can't imagine doing it in less than 4 hours. But just as a connection here, I just found this idea of a 4-hour planning cycle as it relates to this type of operation and sprint planning, and actually thinking about how the work's going to get done. Yep, you can identify a sprint goal. You can identify the backlog items for a sprint in under an hour, probably. I think that we need to think about the discipline to plan how the work will be done is essential. So if you have one more takeaway is, how can we be more disciplined in sprint planning, increase our probability of success? As I often say when I'm in classes with new Scrum Masters and new product owners, this is not about the Scrum guide and being rigid. This is about reducing risk, increasing the probability of success. So thank you all for the time that you've given us. Any questions that Mike and I can answer?
Well, actually, we're a little bit over time, so I don't think we're going to have time for questions at this time. But Michael, and
Applause
Jason-
is called for here. Let's have some applause.
yeah, for sure. We want to thank you guys for being here, and this has been
Well
a
done.
fantastic talk.
Well done.
Beautiful job. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Jason. Thank you very much, Michael.
Our pleasure.
For having us.
Just have to throw out a hoorah.
Hoorah.
Okay,